Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I'm going to give you guys a few basic rules to cover that really cover the basics of nutrition for just overall health and fitness. Everyone really likes to come up with these most extreme diets, these complicated diets, different ideas for things, and they want to make things, again, far more complicated than they actually are for actual health. Now, we're not talking about just body composition here, because body composition is largely, and again, people are going to try to argue with this, but it's largely calories in, calories out versus your weight training and recovery. It's not necessarily entirely related to your actual health and fitness always. I mean, there's correlations there, but it's not complete overlap. So as far as just general health goes, a lot of people who follow various different diets claim their diet is the best. It works the best for them. And whether that's proven true or not, whether it's even a particularly healthy diet or not based upon blood work and research is oftentimes questionable. But all these people see improvements in health markers, and there's a few things most of these diets that do this successfully have in common. And it's really just a few simple rules. And even the most extreme diets oftentimes have these similar things in common. And people seem to fail to grasp this. These are things that people on a vegan diet, a paleo diet, some versions of ketogenic diets, Mediterranean diet, whatever, they have a few things in common. Now, the first thing most of these diets have in common, they have you avoid refined sugars. Think about almost every successful diet you see being touted by various people, whether they're medical doctors or just people who write books or make YouTube videos, have in common. Almost all of them have you either reduce or completely avoid refined sugars. And that doesn't matter whether it's table sugar, high fructose corn syrup, brown sugar, sugar in the raw, any of these are all refined sugars. They generally have you cut them way back, only eat them when maybe cheats in small amounts, or avoid them completely. Refined sugars are pretty bad for you in excess. Now, we could argue about moderation a lot, but we know in excess, which is what most people in first world countries tend to consume, they consume them in excess oftentimes. They're absolutely bad for you. They help promote cancer. They mess up your cholesterol profile. They can mess up your insulin sensitivity, give you diabetes, cardiovascular disease, a whole host of problems. And they can even contribute to obesity. Now, the next thing on the list that people, again, on most of these successful diets have in common, they avoid refined vegetable oils or limit them, and in some cases avoid them completely, even telling you, well, maybe that extra virgin coconut oil isn't such a great idea, or even your extra virgin olive oil might be okay in moderation, but you shouldn't be drowning spoons and spoons full of it every day. And there's a few reasons for this. Number one on the list, obviously, they can be very inflammatory to consume all these refined oils. You oftentimes cook all of the nutrients and phytonutrients and things out of there that you might actually want in some oils. You've stripped away all the fiber in the plants and nutrients. Once you start baking these oils and everything, again, you tend to destroy the vitamin and mineral and phytonutrient profile. And oftentimes it damages all these omega-6 fats. And in many cases, it can make them very pro-inflammatory. The other factor to consider is the contribution to obesity that any sort of vegetable oil can have. The thing is, on your diet, if you're going to, and we'll get to this later, but diets that are really high in fat that don't make adjustments to compensate for that tend to be very fattening, because the fat that you have on your body is usually dietary fat. 99% of the fat you have on your body came from fats that you ate directly. Your body very rarely, under most conditions, stores very much of the other foods that you eat from other calorie sources as fat. It tends to burn them as fuel and then store the excess fat that you eat. Well, it's a lot easier to get in excess fat, particularly if you're overeating. If you're consuming a bunch of vegetable oils, it's very easy to gain body fat very quickly if you're overeating, whereas on a really low-fat diet, you'll gain fat a little slower. You're just throwing empty fat calories in. And on top of that, because they're not part of any sort of food that you're necessarily chewing, there's less satiety to these things. It's very easy to add a lot of extra calories, again, from fat, very, very quickly to your diet from various sorts of oils. It's just an easy way to get too many calories, and particularly too many fat calories, really fast. And so the most successful diets for health overall tend to avoid vegetable oils completely, or limit them and entirely avoid any sort of refined oil or deep fried foods that are fried in oil or anything like that. That's, again, one of the most common ones you'll see in any one of these diets that are generally successful and recommended by any medical doctor, nutritionist, or or even diet guru who may not really know that much about nutrition, but it is something they all tend to have in common. Which then brings us kind of to the next point that will segue us into it. If you consume a lot of carbohydrates in your diet, meaning a high carb diet, you need to consume very, very little fat. You need to limit your dietary fat intake to go with the high carbohydrates. And again, the reason that we noted for that before, if you consume a lot of carbohydrates, your body tends to burn carbohydrates for fuel. And again, all your excess fat calories you consume will be stored as body fat. Well, most people aren't necessarily tracking their calories perfectly. They're not tracking their activity perfectly day to day. They might actually eat in a calorie surplus some days, a calorie deficit the others. And so what ends up happening, if you're on a very, very low fat diet, you tend to gain very little body fat easily. And it's because, again, you're tending to burn carbohydrates for fuel, and the days that you're in a calorie deficit, you'll tend to burn off the little bit of extra body fat you gained from the days where you overate a bit. If you gained any body fat at all, it'll tend to be smaller as a result of the low fat intake. So again, if you're going to consume a lot of carbohydrates, you need to keep your dietary fat fairly low, if not very, very low, other than basically essential fats. This is, again, some of the most successful diets in the world for health, whether it's the Okinawan diet, the Dean Ornish diet that has been used for people with very serious cardiovascular disease. These diets have been used very successfully for health purposes. They've been very, very successful in reversing certain diseases. So again, if you're going to eat a lot of carbs, you need to drop your fat very, very low. So what about the other direction? We go to another rule here. If you're going to consume a lot of fat, you don't want to consume a lot of dietary carbohydrates. And again, the reason for that being, people who consume large amounts of both tend to see, again, really bad changes in blood markers. They're very prone to obesity, insulin resistance, things like that. Whereas in people who follow very high fat diets, such as ketogenic diets, who drop their dietary carbs very, very low, they tend to see improved blood work markers. They tend to see improved cholesterol. Their good cholesterol goes up. Their bad cholesterol usually goes down or stays the same, but at the very least it improves their ratios, which again gives you a resistance to heart attack. A lot of medical conditions have been successfully treated with this, particularly childhood epilepsy, with these ketogenic style diets. It's actually been found over many generations to be more effective than giving these children drugs. There's showing some treatment for certain autoimmune disorders, Alzheimer's, things like that. It's the exact opposite philosophy until you go back and you look at the idea that it's not that fat is good or carbs are good and the other is bad. It's that the two in combination in high amounts can be problematic. Again, if your dietary fat makes up most of the calories in your diet and you keep carbohydrates on the low to rock bottom end, people's blood work tends to improve. They tend to get healthier. They tend to lose weight. They tend to lose body fat. Cholesterol improves. So again, complete opposite philosophies, but they both work, and they work to varying effectiveness for different people. And that's the thing people need to realize. Some people can thrive on either diet. Some people tend to thrive best on one or the other. But let's go back and make this one big rule. Instead of saying one is good and the other is bad, they both seem to work. So the rule there is, if you eat a lot of carbs, you can't eat a lot of fat, and if you eat a lot of fat, you can't eat a lot of carbs. So just pick one. Either eat a lot of fat or eat a lot of carbs, but you can't eat a lot of both successfully. And the last rule that virtually all of the successful diets seem to have in common: green things are usually good for you. You should probably consume more green leafy vegetables, or green vegetables, or red or blue or yellow or whatever in general, but green vegetables tend to be, usually I'll give you a wider variety of different things to eat. But vegetables are good for you. And I didn't say raw vegetables, I didn't say cooked vegetables, I said vegetables. Some vegetables actually have some of their nutrient profiles improved slightly when they're cooked. Some are better when they're raw. Even frozen works. In fact, if vegetables aren't really, really fresh, they're more than a few days old, they actually have a better nutrition profile if they've been frozen, and sometimes even reheated for being frozen. It actually preserves nutrients really well. So the point is, on any healthy diet, if you want to be successful on it, you need to be eating green vegetables, or leafy greens, or any type of vegetable every single day. And I'm not saying you need to eat pounds and pounds of these, although eating a pound of vegetables every day wouldn't be a bad idea. Most people could stand to consume more of them. So there you have it, guys. We could sum this up into three basic rules, and if you follow these 3 rules in terms of your diet, you will probably have a more healthy, more balanced diet than 90% of the people that you know, just by following these 3 rules. And they're the 3 rules that almost every successful bad diet or medically supported diet or anything else out there has in common. Rule number 1, throw those 2 together: reduce or completely avoid refined sugars and refined vegetable oils and foods fried in oils. Rule number 2, you can't eat both a lot of carbs and a lot of fat at the same time. Pick one. Either if you eat high fat, you need to eat low carb. If you eat high carb, you probably need to eat low fat. And rule number 3, vegetables are good for you. You need to be eating vegetables of assorted types every single day if you're concerned with ideal health and fitness. All right, guys, so there you have it. 3 basic rules that can be the foundation of virtually any successful, healthy diet. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.